Rhode Island politics just got a little bit more interesting as former Newport Mayor Xay Khamsyvoravong, now a sitting councilor in the city, has officially entered the race for lieutenant governor. He's going to be primarying Sabina Matos. Let's break it down right now on Bartholomew Town. Welcome into Bartholomew Town. I'm Bill Bartholomew. So, as is the case anytime we discuss the lieutenant governor's race, I think it's important to disclose that, yes, I had floated a candidacy for lieutenant governor in 2025, and it was widely covered by local media. Ultimately, in November of last year, I announced that I will not be entering into the Democrat primary for lieutenant governor. But anytime I talk about that race, I want to make sure I, at least in some way, shape, or form, get that disclaimer out. That's exactly what we're talking about today. And this is a major shift in the lieutenant governor's race. Not unexpected at all. Observers, anybody who follows Rhode Island politics, not even that closely, but definitely if you follow it closely, know that Mayor Xay, as he's known on Aquidneck Island, was going to get into this race. And this is a lot different than any of the other candidates that have gotten into the lieutenant governor's Democrat primary. And when we look across the Rhode Island political landscape, there's really no singular candidate that is like Xay Khamsyvoravong, now a city councilor, again, former mayor of Newport. So Xay will join us here on Bartholomew Town in a matter of moments, and I'll give you a little bit more insight in just a second as to why this race stands out now in a way that it simply didn't before Xay got into it. All right. We're brought to you in part by Navigant Credit Union, who have been a staple of our community for more than 108 years. Today, they're a $3.4 billion institution serving more than 136,000 members across 25 physical branch locations. But since its founding in 1915, the mission has never changed. Navigant Credit Union's team of financial professionals have remained committed to improving the financial well-being of the families, businesses, and communities they serve across Rhode Island. Learn more at navigantcu.org. So, as I mentioned, for Xay here, not a scenario where this was unexpected. There had been fundraisers going on, a lot of sub-rosa communication. It was just well known that Xay was he was certainly considering a strong consideration. And it was just assumed that sometime around, late February, early March, you were going to get this exact announcement. All right. So it doesn't disrupt Rhode Island politics in the moment. But this is the first person who has entered into the Democrat primary for lieutenant governor. You take a look at Cindy Coyne, the former state trooper and state representative. You take a look at Sue Anderbois, the Providence city councilor. That Democrat primary for lieutenant governor, there's nobody who is a potential major statewide player across a variety of spectrum the way that Xay is simply. All right. Xay also signals a generational shift here that is, I think, extremely critical to consider. You get that mid to late 30s, early 40s group of people, mostly men right now, who are in charge, or at least in major positions. Obviously, Seth Magazine or Gabe Amo are Congress people, but Xay is sort of on that track as well. So when we look to this lieutenant governor's race, in a lot of ways, this is a race about the future of the Democrat Party here in Rhode Island. And if you basically remove Sabina Matos and shift to Xay Khamsyvoravong, there's a lot of reasons why that could be the case for a voter. One reason, though, or at least on an incidental level, will be what it signals, which is a generational change. Okay, Xay Khamsyvoravong joins us here in Bartholomew Town right after this.
You and your employees work hard for your customers. At HealthSource RI for Employers, we work hard for all of you. We offer access to 18 quality health insurance plans plus dental, flexible costs to meet your budget and get your staff what they need, and customized local support to guide you through it all. More than 1,200 Rhode Island employers choose health insurance through us. HealthSource RI. We work for you. HealthSourceRI.com/employers.
Xay, great to have you on the show the day after you announced that you're running for lieutenant governor. What's it like to be waking up in the world as an announced candidate?
Bill, it feels exactly like things did yesterday, right? I think we're still just as stressed out about the things going on in the world, things going on in life day to day. But we're hopeful that we can do some good here in this campaign and hopefully in office.
All right. So right out of the gate here, as we look at this lieutenant governor's race, there's no doubt that when the Xay factor has been a major factor for any observers of Rhode Island politics who are paying attention to lieutenant governor's race. So far, while there are credible challengers in that race, challengers to Sabina Matos, the incumbent lieutenant governor, Nobody has come into this race with a sort of infrastructure, name recognition, fundraising operation, et cetera, that you've got. So as you enter into this race, what's your take on the strategy here of how do you take on an incumbent when you have also several other people in this race who are going to distill that sort of opposition vote out? How do you take on an incumbent and define your own brand without making this about going after Sabina Matos explicitly?
I think you captured it right at the beginning there, right? Which is that I am not running against Sabina Matos or against any of the other challengers. I'm running for this office. And I'm hoping that Rhode Islanders will elect me to represent them because of the things and the ideas that I stand for. So much of my campaign is going to be focused in the same way that I was successful down here in Newport, which is in listening to people. We know that there is an extraordinary amount of pain out there right now. We know there's a lot of anxiety out there and frustration. We also know there's a lot of anger out there. And I think the first step in all of this is making sure that people feel like somebody that they can actually talk to and that will actually listen to them is me. And then that's the type of lieutenant governor I'm going to be as their public advocate and their voice, somebody who understands their voice because I've taken the time to listen.
Well, that's interesting you mentioned that. I mean, you were on yesterday on the Dan York Show on WPRO, which I am the producer and fill-in host of. So I sat there and listened to your interview with Dan. Not sat there. It sounds like I was just sitting around. I was operating a radio show. But there was a great moment where you literally said that public advocate kind of responsibility or job description. I could see Dan's eyes light up. We've heard something similar before in the past from Aaron Regenberg, a former state representative out of Providence. In 2018, he challenged then Lieutenant Governor Dan McKee. He had this whole idea that he's going to be the guy who's the ombudsman or something for the state. And it seemed to catch on because he was able to expand his coalition well beyond the progressive base, if you will. There seems to be an appetite for an inspector general. Well, the lieutenant governor is not going to have subpoena power. He can't be an inspector general. So define what public advocate actually means, because I think a lot of people get that confused with some kind of inspector general-esque thing.
No, it's the position that really takes the responsibility for ensuring that the decisions and the issues that the state is making, what the state is focusing on, really are the bread and butter issues that are affecting all of us on a day-to-day basis. I think it can be very tempting to latch on to particular issues that might be a bit more fringe, that are very important, but aren't things that are impacting the viability of families to continue calling this place home on a day-to-day basis. And I think the public advocate's job is to ensure that those core issues, the government's beliefs and values, are dead center. I do think there's a difference between the race that you noted and the race where we stand today, in that the lieutenant governor became governor. And so the additional skill set that somebody needs to have and demonstrate needs to be more than just being an effective voice raising issues that are important. It also needs to be a problem solver, somebody that has a demonstrated capability to lead as an executive, that understands how to solve problems in government and deliver solutions for working families. That's a very interesting duality that this office offers if done right and if executed well. That's where my focus is going to be. The role of public advocate itself, though, is something that any one of us can do, but becomes a whole lot easier when you have a statewide platform, one of the highest offices in the state, an enormous amount of latitude to choose the issues that you are pursuing on a day-to-day basis. I got to experience this at a local level, serving on the city council when we dealt with the birthing center closure issue, where we decided that what we were going to do, working together in our community, was ensure that one of the largest healthcare networks in the state understood that women's ability to safely deliver babies, that women are the foundation, that maternal health is the foundation of family health in a community, is a priority in the healthcare system. It is not a bottom line budgetary decision that gets made. This is why our healthcare system exists, and that we're going to make that a priority and publicly advocate for that to be so, and effectively ensure that that point got made to decision makers. That's the work that a good public advocate should be able to do.
That's a great example. The Newport Birthing Center, anyone unfamiliar with that will have some detailed specials coming up on that later this year as that continues to progress. But basically, in sum, Brown University Health threatening to close the birthing center at Newport Hospital last year, community reaction and leadership reaction, including Xay on that one. Look, they kept the center open as currently constituted. No promises about the future. So this type of public advocacy also requires a sustained advocacy, because it's not just good enough to say, hey, it's an election year, I'm going to get up there and make a speech. When you look at the birthing center, it's also a good example of you have to know the groundwork and know where the ball might be rolling, or if it doesn't roll where you think it's going to go, how to go down that other lane as well.
Yeah, but you have to be able to get up learning curves very quickly if you're going to be effective in a role like this. We did that with the Learning Center. But where you can, and you can do the advanced work, you want to do as much of that as possible to ensure that you're effective when the fight comes to you. One of those areas that we're very focused on right now is primary care. Part of the reason why we kicked off our campaign, not only with the announcement video, but with a roundtable with primary care professionals, is because that's one of those areas that I think Rhode Islanders right now are struggling with. It's very difficult to get access to a primary care physician. If you lose your primary care physician, like our whole household did with my wife, it can take you almost a year to find a new one, even if you have every connection in the book. It's amazing how humbled medical professionals get on the system when all of a sudden they lose their own primary care physician. And they say, wait a second, I'm a doctor, just like my mother was, right? And it's taking me a long time to find somebody. This is a real issue that impacts us on a day-to-day basis. It's an issue that I plan on hitting the ground running with as soon as we get elected to make sure that that is a priority for whoever the next governor is.
Yeah, and so with that, I think not even a fair question, an essential question here is, are you ready to be governor of Rhode Island?
You know, we're going to certainly work to ensure that that's the case. I have had the pleasure of leading, I think, one of the most iconic cities in America down here in Newport. I served as chair of one of the state's largest drinking water utilities for a long term. I've served as a senior executive, a chief operating officer in very large businesses in this country. And so I bring to the table that executive experience with the public policy background and the political know-how to actually ensure that we keep the focus on Rhode Island families.
Xay, one last question here as we prepare for a long election season. How do you pace this? It's a weird election. Like, for example, today we're not having the primaries are taking place in Texas. That's a major situation where we're really going to understand both the pulse of the Democrat and Republican parties on an observational level by the end of the day today. Whereas here in Rhode Island, we're talking right after Labor Day weekend. So it's a marathon. It's also a marathon after what you know well as a Rhode Islander and a Newport leader. I mean, beach season, it is not an easy time to campaign. So what's your strategy right now? Are you going to, I mean, we'll see it roll out, but do you feel like this is something that is, that makes it more difficult because you have the long runway, or do you have more time to introduce yourself to voters? So, hey, you know what? It doesn't matter that you have to rally people 2 days after they were at a Labor Day event or a day after a Labor Day event.
I think that's a great question, especially because you do draw so much attention from those in the political sphere. The reality is that this fight of fixing the underlying problems that we have is not going to be a quick one. It is going to take a sustained effort, a lot of collaboration and problem solving, and a lot of energy to actually fix the things that are impacting people on a day-to-day basis. So I look at the campaign essentially as your endurance training to be able to take on that role and task. I've spent almost my entire life balancing the duality of both a very successful professional career with constant civic engagement and involvement. But there's nothing particularly special about that because I think that's something that most of us are doing in our day-to-day lives. I think a lot about this past snowstorm and lessons that we pulled away. And I distinctly remember a firefighter who had been on duty all day at the department, got off duty, made sure that his family was squared away as quickly as possible, and then got back out there with a snowblower and was snowblowing out neighbors in our neighborhoods here in Newport, not for any payment, but just to make sure that people could get out. There was no point in time where he said, how am I going to sustain this and make sure that I can keep doing this work? That's who Rhode Islanders are. And so whether it's through a crisis like we had with the snowstorm or on the day-to-day basis of the work that we're doing in our communities and our churches and our nonprofits, this is a huge driver of just who we are as people. And I draw an enormous amount of inspiration and energy from that. And that's the energy that's going to fuel us through this campaign and ensure that we come into office with the energy ready necessary to bring the urgency we need to solve these problems.
Xay Khamsyvoravong, Newport City Councilor, former mayor of Newport, a long roster of public and private sector accomplishments, and now the latest entrant on a statewide basis into the political season of 2026 as you seek the Democrat nomination for lieutenant governor. Thanks so much for your time today.
Bill, thanks so much for having me.
Thanks for stopping by Bartholomew Town, where we are brought to you in part by the University of Rhode Island Online. Visit uri.edu/online. Newport Film, visit newportfilm.com. And by Waterfire, visit waterfire.org. I'm Bill Bartholomew. We'll talk to you on Thursday.